India Tonight, I'm Karan Thapar. After the pandemonium in Patna, the Natak in Karnataka. Tonight we examine the constitutional song and dance staged by politicians in Bangalore. The facts are simple. The Karnataka governor gave Dharam Singh 8 days to seek a vote of confidence, but he failed to do so. Was this defiance or was it simply confusion in the assembly? Secondly, on the day the vote should have been taken, the speaker recognized Kumaraswamy as the leader of the JDS. Was that inevitable and unavoidable or an attempt to load the dice against Dharam Singh? And then there are the steps the governor himself took to sort out the mess. Did he behave with propriety and fairness, or were his actions incomprehensible and a grave constitutional error? With me to debate last week's crisis in Karnataka, from the Congress party, its spokesperson and a leading lawyer, Abhishek Singhvi. From the BJP, its spokesperson and former Law Minister, Arun Jaitley. And joining us from his residence, the former Attorney General of India, Soli Swarabji. Mr. Singhvi, let's start with developments in Karnataka. How do you explain Dharam Singh's deliberate failure to fulfill the governor's instructions to seek a vote of confidence by the 27th?
Well, he was all set to seek a vote of confidence. He was ready to do it. And surely, if he's intended to resign, and he did resign the next day, it can't be that he wanted to prolong himself in office by not doing it on 27th. The reason he didn't complete the process on 27th is, according to him and according to a lot of other people who were present, he wanted to make a speech in the assembly. The speaker was not able to provide conditions conducive to him for him to make a speech, and he then said that he would want an opportunity to make a speech. The matter was, the assembly was adjourned.
Can I interrupt you on facts? No, first of all, he wasn't set to resign. He went to the governor to ask, in fact, for 2 more days so that another session could be convened. Yeah. Secondly, he failed to submit the motion by the 25th, the due date for setting the agenda. And even on the 27th, on 4 occasions, he was asked by the speaker to table the motion and didn't do so. So it sounds very much like reluctance.
No, as far as the 27th is concerned, he repeatedly told the speaker that he wanted to address the assembly, and since there were numerous MLAs of the BJP and the JDS in the assembly, in the well of the house, he could not do so. That's the 27th. Now, certainly, officially and openly, he asked the governor for more time, but that's openly done. He knew very well, I think everybody knew by the 27th, that we didn't have the numbers unless Mr. Devagowda set his own house in order.
Arun Jaitley, on the other hand, Dharam Singh has said that there was so much commotion in the assembly that it was impossible for him to move the motion, and the speaker would not help him. Worse, the speaker is alleged to have caused the trouble by recognizing Kumaraswamy as the leader of the JDS on the day of the confidence test itself. So let me put this to you. Did the speaker play fairly, or did he in fact cleverly precipitate matters?
I think both the governor and the speaker played absolutely fairly. If at all, the governor was a little lenient to Mr. Dharam Singh in the very beginning. Mr. Dharam Singh lost majority on the 19th of January.
But let's come to the governor. Let's come to the governor at moment. Let's talk about the speaker first. I will come to the governor later.
27th. Let's come to the 27th. Mr. Dharam Singh was to submit his motion by the 25th. He didn't do so. On the 27th, when the House assembled, in the morning, 2 hours were wasted in objecting to an official sitting in the visitors gallery. The next 2 hours were wasted in paying homage to 3 people who had passed away in the meanwhile. Thereafter, the House kept adjourning repeatedly. When the Speaker asked him to submit the motion, he would not do so because figures were staring him on the face and time was running out. By 12 o'clock midnight, he had to seek a vote of confidence. He didn't do that. What was the Speaker supposed to do under the circumstances? The Speaker had a request from almost 47 MLAs of the JDS. And the effective strength of the JDS is close to 50, because out of the 59, about 8 or 9 had already gone away and had been suspended along with Mr. Siddaramaiah. So almost 95% of the members or more of the JDS were with Kumaraswamy. He said he's been elected the leader. Can any speaker recognize a group of 3 as the leader of the House or one of them and disregard 47 out of 50 and not appoint him as the leader of the assembly, of the party in the assembly? The speaker did exactly what was the correct thing for him to do under the circumstances.
Soli Swarabji, how do you view what happened? Is it defiance of the governor by the Chief Minister Dharam Singh, or is it a deliberate loading of the dice against the Chief Minister by a less than impartial speaker? Which do you think it was?
Well, let's be a little kind to the Chief Minister. I think may not defiance, but definitely reluctance and the lingering hope that some miracle would happen. But the main thing is, why did he not table the motion? He was supposed to do that. He was supposed to face the confidence test. And well, if he says that there were disturbances in the House, and there were, I suppose, there were interruptions. And as far as the Chief Minister is concerned, I fault him on this. Why did he not table the motion? And why did he not, when the Speaker asked him to face the test, not face it? As far as the Speaker is concerned, Karan, I think with hindsight, you might say, I don't think there was anything lacking in bona fides. I didn't understand why he adjourned the House sine die, but I suppose in those circumstances he thought that was the only course available to him, because otherwise it wasn't possible to have a floor test.
Abhishek Singhvi, let's first take up the issue about Mr. Dharam Singh's behavior. It seems to everyone that in fact his real intention was to avoid the floor test. That's why he failed to send in the motion by the 25th, the deadline. That's why he in fact used the excuse of commotion on the floor to not move it on the 27th. So even if he wasn't deliberately defying the governor, clearly he was circumventing the governor's instructions.
No. I think you have to see the larger picture. I think there was nobody in any doubt, including Mr. Dharam Singh, that he did not have the numbers unless Mr. Devagowda did what he had promised to do.
And that's what he was hoping, that a miracle would happen.
Oh yes.
So he was delaying it, and so he was circumventing, as you say yourself.
I'm accepting to the point you're saying that of course he was hoping. He hoped till the evening of Friday because Mr. Devagowda gave him to hope.
And as a result, he was circumventing.
No, not circumventing. That's the point. Had this gone on beyond, you see, it was suddenly adjourned, and the next day he left. So the difference is what we're talking about now, Friday to Saturday. This is certainly not intention.
He crossed the Lakshman
He
Rekha
officially
set by
asked the governor, as every chief minister is entitled to do, look, I need more time, I might get a majority. Governor refused, he left the office.
He has no business to be seeking more time. He was very clearly told that you establish a vote of confidence by the 27th, and he didn't do so.
2 points, Karan, we're missing out. One, had the Speaker not adjourned the House sine die, Mr. Dharam Singh would nevertheless have been forced to seek a vote of confidence the same day. Second, he is fully entitled officially to ask the governor. Governor is fully entitled to refuse. It is defiance only after that refusal. If Dharam Singh doesn't go, he went.
Arun
There's no
Jaitley,
defiance.
let's take up this issue of the Speaker now. Why did the Speaker adjourn the House sine die? Why did he not simply adjourn it for 30 minutes or 40 minutes to restore order? Because by adjourning it sine die, it made people think that he was deliberately creating a situation where the governor would have to dismiss the Dharam Singh government.
Well, from 10 in the morning till 7 in the evening, the Speaker conducted the proceedings of the House. As I mentioned earlier, 2 hours was spent in condolence speeches and 2 hours was spent objecting to a particular official. This was essentially a filibustering tactics which Mr. Dharam Singh and his party had followed in the House. Thereafter, when he repeatedly asked him 4 times to table the motion, he wouldn't table the motion. He was supposed to do it by the 25th. He didn't do it even on the 27th despite being asked to do so. And at a stage by 7 in the evening, it must have become clear to the Speaker that Dharam Singh is no longer interested in tabling the motion because the figures are very clear. The figures are loaded against Mr. Dharam Singh, and therefore the Speaker had no option rather than to carry out a meaningless exercise of postponing the House every half an hour. He adjourned the House 4 times during that day because disturbances were being created and the motion was not being tabled. Thereafter, enough is enough, and it's the Speaker's discretion then, after giving reasonable opportunity, to conclude that he is not tabling the motion, and therefore the report to that effect would go to the governor.
It may be the Speaker's discretion, but did the Speaker not also have at least a duty in terms of honor to consult the Chief Minister and to forewarn him that if you do not table the motion within the next hour or 2, I will be adjourning the House sine die? That specific step of forewarning never happened.
Well, what language you use is essentially the Speaker's own business. But what the Speaker has done, the essence of that is very clear. 4 times he requests him to table the motion. He doesn't do that. On the contrary, there is disturbance and the House has to be adjourned. When that's not happening, I think it's as clear as daylight to me that the Speaker was giving him an opportunity and Mr. Dharam Singh was not tabling the motion because he didn't have the figures.
So, Mr. Rabji, it seems to laymen right the way across the length and breadth of India that neither the Speaker nor the former Chief Minister emerged from this fiasco, if I can so call it, with honor on their side. Would you agree that both as a result are lesser men, but that the real loser is Indian democracy? Its image has been tarred.
Yeah, right, Karan. In all these matters, the way the constitutional function is let down and don't live up to the dignity of their office. But here I must tell you one thing. Let's be very clear. It's come out very clearly. The cat is out of the bag. He was hoping for a miracle. He was hoping that Devgowda may be able to pull it off. He did not. But he was hoping for the miracle, and that's the reason I think it was stage managed. All these considerations, all the disturbances and other things which made it impossible for the motion to be put on vote.
Can I interrupt?
Not really.
Are you suggesting that in fact in hoping for a miracle there was a certain amount of deliberate mala fide on the part of the Chief Minister?
No, not mala fide. There was a certain amount of deliberate reluctance to face it. He was trying to put off the evil day.
Okay.
When he realized that it cannot be done, then he sought to say, make out as if he very gracefully resigned.
All right.
That I don't believe at all. And as far as the speaker is concerned, look, it's all very well for us in the studio in my home to say he shouldn't have adjourned his Sanada, but in the circumstances, what was the lack of bona fides in his adjourning it? Sanada, I also myself have a little doubts about it. He could have done it on the next day. But then on the next day, the situation was very different. Dharam Singh did not hope for a miracle. His prayers were not answered.
Okay.
And then he had to face the inevitable.
Arun Jaitley, the other aspect of this Karnataka fiasco, if I can call it that, is the comment made by you about the governor when he initially gave Dharam Singh 8 days within which to prove his majority. You accused him of committing a grave constitutional error, which you added was incomprehensible. Now, it appears thereafter that not only have the press said that the governor behaved impeccably, but senior leaders of your own party don't agree with you. In particular, Venkaiah Naidu. So do you today owe the governor an apology?
Well, I certainly don't owe an apology to anyone. Even Mr. Venkaiah Naidu has very clearly mentioned that the time given is more than what normally should have been given.
Forgive me, can I interrupt and correct that? Can I correct that? On CNN, IBN, on the 28th of January, Venkaiah Naidu said 8 days was a reasonable time.
Well, after winning, we have to be modest. Please read Mr. Venkaiah Naidu's statement on the 20th and the 21st itself. It doesn't exactly say that. Now, let's first analyze this 8-day business. The assembly was in session from the 19th. Since this was the first day of the session in the new calendar year, it had to be a joint session. Therefore, constitutional obligation was that the governor would address the joint session. On the 18th itself, the governor had been told that Mr. Dharam Singh had lost majority because the JDS had withdrawn support. Now, don't forget, in the case of Jharkhand, when 1 month's time was given, when a new assembly had to be summoned, MLAs had to come from all over, the Supreme Court felt that time is not to be given for cobbling up a majority, time is to be given for the purposes of proving a majority. And the Supreme Court felt 3 days' time would be sufficient. Now, instead of going to the governor, if the MLAs had instead next morning on the 20th tabled a motion of no confidence, perhaps by the 20th evening they would have had a result. In an ongoing session of an assembly, you adjourn the session, and instead of asking for a vote of confidence the next day or the day thereafter, you give 8 days time. Now, 8 days is a time which is given really to manage a majority and not to establish a majority.
Let me put that to Abhishek
time being given when a session has to be called, but not when a session is going on.
Abhishek Singhvi, regardless of the propriety of criticizing the governor, let's leave that aside for a moment. But there is a point that Arun Jaitley has when he says that in giving Dharam Singh 8 days, he was being given time to cobble together a majority rather than simply prove it. And thereafter, Dharam Singh's behavior and your admission that he was hoping for a miracle suggest that in fact Arun Jaitley's interpretation is completely correct.
I think the implication of what Mr. Jaitley is saying is that the governor in fact acted mala fide, because he thought that there was clearly no majority, he knew there was no majority, but that somehow somebody would cobble together.
Well, let's not say mala fide, because that suggests he did it deliberately, but he acted wrongly.
Well, wrongly said, yes.
Even if he erred innocently.
It means that we leave no discretion to the governor. We all must second guess the governor. We all must have our opinions about the governor. Tomorrow he gives 6 days, somebody says no, 4 days is enough, somebody says 8 days is enough. So you are entitled to make an allegation. I mean, somebody would say 6 days is enough, somebody would say 8 days is enough. How do you accuse a governor, and how does the governor complete his task and work if everybody starts taking pot shots on 8 days? Point number 2, let me just add one thing. Of course, when I say that he expected a miracle, it means that Mr. Devgowda officially promised the Congress till Friday. That's what it means. No, not a miracle. He promised, miracle means that he promised to have enough numbers.
Let me bring in Mr. Sarabji. Mr. Sarabji, on this specific question of whether the governor's discretion can be second guessed or not, is it fit and proper that a former law minister should criticize him in such severe terms as to almost be questioning the governor's personal integrity? Because when Arun Jaitley accuses the governor of a grave constitutional error, it's a fairly deep, severe criticism that he's making. So is that fit and proper?
No, I think, Karan, you are putting words in Arun's mouth. He has not accused the governor of lack of bona fides at all. I think what he has said is that the governor has erred very much on the side of leniency. You know, it's all very well to say 3 days, 5 days. It all depends on the situation. The governor, I think, gave reasons, because 26th was a Republic Day. On 25th or something else, the legislature said they were busy with something. And we gave, but I also thought 27th was a bit too long. But it's a matter of discretion. Now, one cannot say that discretion was really used in a malafide manner. That's the last thing I would say.
So is it a grave but was it a grave constitutional error?
I don't think it was a grave constitutional error. These matters cannot be described in terms of errors. You might say it was an over-liberal exercise of discretion. He went overboard to prove his fairness to the Chief Minister.
I think that's the deciding euphemism that we'll settle with, an over-liberal exercise of discretion. Very diplomatically put, I might add. Let's take a break at that point and come back and ask, what does all of this tell us about the sort of people who should be appointed governors? And will our three guests agree on that? See you in a moment after this break. Welcome back to the second half of this discussion on India Tonight. Arun Jaitley, let's come to the question of the sort of people who are appointed governors. Do you accept that after Bihar, Jharkhand, Goa and now Karnataka, politicians should not be given governorships either as ways of retiring them or as ways of rewarding years of loyal service?
Well, I think that's an extreme position, that, well, a journalist can be given, a retired general can be given, a retired civil servant can be given a governorship, but a politician is debarred. A politician also has a huge experience in public affairs. I think what the Justice Venkatachalaya Commission, which reviewed the functioning of the Constitution, has suggested is perhaps a more correct course, that those who have been active in politics till yesterday itself need not be appointed governors today. Those who have whose activism ceased to exist some reasonable time ago perhaps would be more appropriate if they are considered, but men from various walks of life, people from the civil service, people from the army, people from various other services, certainly can also be appointed governors.
Very quickly, what is a reasonable time frame for the cooling off between active politics and then becoming a governor?
Well, I think it would depend from an individual to individual. In some cases where people have come from some specialized areas, entered politics and thereafter go as governors and have an ability to be fair when they perform their functions as governors, it could be much less. But those who from day one have been active politicians until yesterday were active politicians till they lost an election or had to resign from a cabinet, then perhaps some reasonable cooling off period by which they can be detached from some element of active politics, that time would have to be considered. I don't think you can fix a specific time period for everyone.
Abhishek Manu Singhvi, the best example of what I'm talking about is in fact Sushil Kumar Shinde. He was still technically Chief Minister of Maharashtra when he was appointed Governor of Andhra, and then literally minutes after he ceased to be Governor of Andhra, he was inducted into the Union Cabinet and all of that happened yesterday. Can't you see that this sort of interlinkage actually undermines his credibility as an independent, non-political constitutional governor?
It's unfair to take names, totally unfair.
But it's a perfect example, that's why I'm taking it. It illustrates the point.
We are discussing reform for the future. This is a recommendation, partly the Sarkaria Commission, partly the
yesterday that I'm talking about.
You are talking about, there are hundreds of, why should Mr. Shinde be singled out? There are any number of people who join tomorrow and leave after the point I'm making is a little larger. I think this is something which needs attention. It needs to be worked together on a consensus of political parties, culling out the best parts of both Sarkaria and Venkatachalaya. I think ultimately we must remember that an institution is only as good or as bad as the person. So it depends very much on the kind of person. There are no absolute time rules, 1 year this way, 1 year that way. But I think you certainly must attend to this, evolve guidelines, and the guidelines have to have not only a cooling off period. You may also think of a post-governorship, whether you can hold any post or not.
One quick question.
So therefore I agree.
Are you, like Arun Jaitley, against barring politicians in principle from governorships?
Oh yes, you can't have an absolute rule. It would be very unfair to have absolute rule that nobody in politics in the past can ever be a governor.
Well,
I think that's
sorry, Sir, we have a very interesting position. Despite the fact that they disagreed with virtually everything one said about the other in part one of the show, On the issue of whether politicians should be barred, both gentlemen representing the BJP in Congress have very similar views. Politicians shouldn't be barred. What's your view on that principle? Should politicians be barred from governorships?
No, Karan, we can't take an absolutist position. Even Nehru in Constituent Assembly and even Sarkaria and Venkatachala Commission said politicians who have been very actively associated with local politics, politicians who are, if I may say so, deep dive politicians. But when we are saying about the negative part of who should be barred or not, why can't we say the persons who should be appointed should be people eminent in public life, educationists, people who take part in public affairs? Why not have those positive qualities rather than say, think of a cooling period and things like that? As Manu or someone said, ultimately it depends on the individual. K. Munshi was in a sense a politician. He made a wonderful governor. The whole question is, do not appoint politicians who have been so closely associated with party politics, from the very nature of things they cannot take an objective view.
If Arun Jaitley, the issue is keeping out undesirable politicians from governorships, then would you accept the Sarkaria Commission recommendation that governors should be appointed not just in consultation with the Chief Minister of the state, but also the Vice President and the Speaker, in the hope that this wider consultative body will ensure that undesirable politicians never make it?
Well, I think the process of consultation with the Chief Minister was an active step which the NDA government had done in all cases. And if further institutional reform is required so as to have eminent people from public life and from public affairs appointed as governors, I think my party and myself would be willing to go if there, that way if national consensus on the issue.
Abhishek Singhvi, what about another recommendation of the Sarkaria Commission that would guarantee, if implemented, that governors behave in a more independent fashion? And that is, guarantee their tenure rather than the present form, which is that they serve at the pleasure of the President.
I think that's again something to be looked at carefully. I think there is merit in that, and I think it should be followed. It has to be coupled with a rule about post-completion of tenure, further jobs, further assignments.
In other words, they would be barred from taking up further jobs under the union or the state government.
Well, I mean, if you are to talk about guaranteeing their tenure, then you have to look at that as well, because if you look at it, it has to be an overall comprehensive scheme. It can't be just a piecemeal suggestion. But yes, these things I think need to be looked at together in a group, and they need cross-party support. And they need to be evolved into guidelines which are actually followed by everybody.
Soli Sarabji, we have only about 40 seconds left. You've heard both politicians on this program say that they are amenable and their parties would be amenable to considering reform. Now, as someone who's been the senior law officer of the government of India for 6 years, does this fill you with a sense of optimism that people are learning the right lessons? Or is this just the sort of thing politicians say on television when they're cornered?
Very guarded optimism, knowing what politicians say and what they perform later. But apart from the security of tenure, please have some restriction of the power of transfer and removal. He can't be removed at the drop of a hat. He can't be removed for any reason. He must have some security which even a class 4 employee has. So his removal should be on grounds which make him unfit to hold the office. That will be one safeguard.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Soli Sarabji, and my thanks also to Abhishek Singhvi and Arun Jaitley for joining us. Clearly, how we appoint our governors and how they serve and just how secure they are is a subject of critical importance. Hopefully, we won't have to return to it with a crisis staring us in the face next time.